Some interesting developments on impeachment. Now, we covered exactly what happened earlier in the show, but I wanted to bring you something that's kind of come to my mind recently. Both Krystal and I really observing this. Let's put Mitch McConnell's statement after impeachment up there on the screen. He talks about how the House has voted to impeach. However, Krystal, what he notes there is the length of every respective impeachment trial and says that he will not consent to bringing back the Senate for an emergency session, which is early for an impeachment trial, saying there is no circumstance under which this would not drag into President-elect Biden, future President Biden's term, saying, therefore, he will not reconvene the Senate until January 19th, unless all 100 senators agree to reconvene sooner, which is not going to happen. So in effect, if there is an impeachment trial, a big if, we still don't know. If Chuck Schumer wants to spend the first 100 days, we don't know if Joe Biden would even want that and would ask the Democrats to hold off in order to take it up later. That Mitch McConnell could be, in effect, this is what I believe, he might be setting up the great delay tactic of all time, saying, I won't agree until January 19th, then forcing the Democrats' hands, Chuck Schumer and others, to do a trial. That's the first 30 days of the Biden administration. No confirmation for his Treasury secretaries, no legislation, emergency checks, and all those things going through, because we still don't have a ruling yet from the Senate parliamentarian on whether you can even do two things at the same time. And one thing I know for certain in D.C. is they almost certainly can't. So it's a big deal, this entire thing.
What we know is that Biden asked McConnell to explore whether he could do that dual track, and McConnell didn't rule it out. He said he was going to consult with the Senate parliamentarian who's in charge of figuring out all of these arcane rules and what you can and can't do. So he didn't shoot it down right out of the gates. But I mean, if you look at it from McConnell's perspective, on the one hand, he appears to be weighing, whether this is genuous or disingenuous, weighing what to do in terms of conviction. He's probably making a lot of calls, seeing where the votes are, seeing how people are feeling, because he's deciding what's the best play in terms of himself and his post-Senate career, and also in terms of the Republican Party, keeping in mind that, look, McConnell's power comes from the power and standing of the Republican Party. So of everyone, he has the most interest, the most personal self-interest in keeping the Republican Party as strong as possible. So I think he's calculating, look, maybe the best thing to do is just to completely sideline this guy and be done with him. So we can't run for office again, so we don't have to deal with him for 4 years. Maybe he's calculating that having him hang out there for 4 years is actually worse and more divisive for the Republican Party than if you were to kind of rip the Band-Aid off and get rid of him altogether in terms of his ability to run for office again. So maybe he's weighing those pieces, but he certainly loves the opportunity to delay Biden's initial agenda and his long time initial confirmation schedule. He certainly loves that ability because he gets to obstruct without it even being on him. You're how can you rail? You can't rail against McConnell's obstruction really when it was Democrats who wanted impeachment, who wanted the trial. And on the first part about whether the trial will actually go forward in this timeline, Clyburn had floated, I think we played it on the show, this idea of well, maybe we'll wait 100 days, which I always thought was a really stupid idea because it completely undermines the point that you're trying to make, that this is really important and really existential and something we have to do right now. It seems like that talk of delaying the Senate trial has now cooled down because it just seemed from a public perspective, it seems sort of silly.
I just think Biden is screwed then, because why would you want, here's the thing, if you're a Republican senator or Tommy Tuberville or something, you're going to drag that thing out as long as possible. Last time around, remember, the Republicans actually consented to making it as short as possible because they knew how they were all going to vote, and it was still 27 days or something like that. They could dratch this thing out for 60 days. 60 days of no confirmation votes, no floor time. Here's another thing to remember, which is that it takes 30 hours of open debate. And I know 30 hours of open Senate floor debate in order to vote on a nominee. And I'm talking about people who are Deputy Treasury Secretary, a U.S. Ambassador to the U.K., 4-star generals, all these things, very arcane Senate rules. Well, impeachment is going to take up all of that time. I think this is one thing we know. Joe Biden did not want any of this. He does not want to have to deal with an impeachment trial. He would much rather get started, I think rightfully, So I'm beginning to wonder, is McConnell just like an evil genius here who like put this cherry of impeachment, spirited the impeachment trial, now saying I won't begin until January 19th. This would be the greatest obstruction tool of all time. And as you say, it's not like he asked for the impeachment. So if he wants to drag that thing out, you could look and be like, look, you're the ones who did this. And the entire White House will be empty. So what are they going to do?
So I am not an expert on Senate parliamentary rules, right? But it will be Schumer who's in charge then, and who will have a lot of discretion over how the schedule is run and how the trial is run and how much time it will ultimately take up. So that's one piece of it. The other piece is, I'm not so sure that Republicans are super excited about like dwelling on this moment, which was truly disgraceful, and very few elected Republican officials are actually defending. I'm not so sure that they're anxious to spend days and days and days relitigating what the president said, what the president did, which members may have been involved in helping to foment this, who did what, who were they giving tours of reconnaissance beforehand, like has been alleged, how violent was the insurrection. I'm not so sure that they're super excited about spending a lot of time on that, even if it is in service of temporarily stymieing the Biden administration's policy objectives.
It's possible. I'm always trying to be as cynical as possible whenever it comes to these people. And this is part of the problem with the U.S. Senate. Even if 98% of the senators agree with you, all you need is one, right? That's how the Senate works. You can hold up a nominee, one senator, and he doesn't even have to name who it is. It's completely secret. So one senator, through just objections to parliamentary, so much of the Senate runs on something called unanimous consent, which is like everybody just agrees. All you have to do is object. If there's just one person, like I said, a Tuberville or somebody else who wants to be like a MAGA hero and just delay as long as possible, you could really hamstring, I think, a lot of the early Biden administration. Now, you're right. Schumer's going to be in charge. I don't know how the Senate trial works. There are specific things that say in the United States, in the Constitution. Remember, we learned this all last time, having now covered half of all impeachments in U.S. history. Remember, it's a 6-day-a-week trial. So I believe that once you go into trial, it's not like you can come out of trial. It's like very difficult. And that it's a set period of time during the day. All 100 senators have to be at their desks. There was that whole problem about the impeachment trial and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren on the campaign trail. So then what are you going to do? There are a lot of interesting questions that come to play here. And I really do think that if they do this in the first 100 days, it will screw Biden for a long time, because the first 100 days are the most important times, and there's a lot much more important legislation and stuff to pass. It's going to be interesting. Yeah, it is going to. It will be interesting to see how this is played. If I had to guess, I would say this is a bonus for McConnell, and he's going to work it for. Like, I don't think that this is the primary end and objective of McConnell, but is this like a cherry on top for him? Yes, absolutely, 100%, and he will work it to the fullest extent. That's right. More Rising for you after this.